Dear colleagues, nice to meet you. Thank you for attending. Let's talk about the Weevil research in the Holy Land, or in other words, in the land of Israel, which is actually a crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. Being a crossroad, it is very interesting place. It's for a small place of only 22,000 square kilometers. We have a very rich and diverse fauna, which comprises all Palearctical and Euro-Siberian elements, Irano-Turanian and Saros-Indian elements, and Afrotropical and sometimes even Oriental elements, which is not that relevant for weevils, probably. Israel is a small but very diverse place with high altitudes, over 2,000 meters or over 1,000 meters, sometimes with the snow for most part of the year, and the very low and hot places, like in the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea. We have also forests and also dunes. We have a desert and the swamps, streams, ponds, although most part of the territory, or at least of the temperate part of Israel, is bata, a kind of maki comprising low shrubs and not much trees. We don't know much about the ancient fauna of our area, apart to the granary weevils, which were available probably also for King Solomon. The research, the normal, yes, let's say recent mode research started about 300 years ago, when our area was a very remote part of Ottoman Empire. Difficult to arrive, difficult to stay here. The first known collector in our area was Linnaeus Apostol, Frederick Hasselquist. We don't know about weevils that he collected. Beetles, yes. Weevils, we don't know. Famous Olivier, on his famous trip to Persia, somehow jumped over the land of Israel. He has been to Lebanon, to Syria, and to Egypt, and described a lot of weevil species, which actually occur here in the land of Israel, but they were not described, not collected here. The first known collector was Félicien de Soucy, amateur archaeologist looking for Sodom and Gomorrah. Didn't find them, but found a lot of weevils, and together with Louis Reiche from Paris Museum, published several publications also describing new taxa. Since then, during the 19th century, a lot of collectors, not only from France, but these are examples from France, visited in our area, did very difficult journeys, collected. Most of the material is now in European museums, most of it probably in the Paris Museum. The first attempts of faunistic research were made by Johann Zalberg. He published a long list of beetles from our area, collected by him and his brave wife. Also, this list included a lot of weevil species. Enrico Festa was an Italian physician that traveled in our area, and he gave all his materials to Baudi de Selle, which published also very interesting lists. Edmund Reiter published several new taxa from our area. In his collection, he had quite a lot of specimens from the Holy Land, or Ottoman Syrian, or how do you want to call it. However, he never collected here by himself. He probably bought materials from travelers and pilgrims, and he also had a few people, probably missionaries, that were working in the land of Israel. One of them probably in Haifa area. His labels says Syrian Haifa, and another one somewhere in Jerusalem or near Jerusalem, but exact localities and dates are not known. Maurice Pic visited our area several times at the end of 19th and the beginning of 20th century, collected a lot, described a lot of varieties, and this really is does some problems to somebody who wants to do a research on Israeli fauna. Local collectings started from the beginning of 20th century. Mainly there were Jews that repatriated back in Israel, also to Ottoman Empire, then to the British Mandatory Palestine. Israel Aroni was probably the first. He considered himself as the first Hebrew zoologist. He mainly studied the vertebrates, but he also collected insects. Until 30s, he sent his material to England and to Germany. Later, he left the material here, and we have part of his materials. Bateran Schmitz, missionary, German Catholic priest, devoted a lot of time for collecting insects all over Israel, but mainly in Jerusalem and around the Sea of Galilee. Yaakov Palmoni was a teacher in a small settlement in Kibbutz Tigania. For nearly 40 years, he collected in this very interesting area, low area, minus 200 meters. And his collectings are mainly here in our collection. Now this area is totally destroyed, populated. There is no natural places all over there. So his collections are very important to know what was there. Fritz Shimon Bodenheimer arrived in the early 20s to be an agricultural entomologist, and he realized very fast that he cannot only study agricultural insects, pests. So he made a very huge collection all over Israel and then British Mandatory Palestine, and published a list of all living beings that included 224 weevil species. Some of them were even identified properly. Later, only some agricultural research on pests, on Cytona, Pionida was done. I have to emphasize the work of Yosef Halperin. He reared insects, different insects from their host plants, also from wood. A very difficult technique, which he needed a lot of time for this. And he later published a small but valuable paper together with Jan Fremont with a list of local weevil species with their host plants, which is very important. These people were not weevil researchers. They were entomologists working on other groups, but they were extraordinary collectors and collected a lot of weevils. Thank you, dear colleagues. Some of you I never saw, but some I knew personally. Now we have several people that work or collect weevils throughout Israel. Elon Orbach is an amateur coleopterist. He just published a paper on Branchidae of Israel. David Firth, working in Smithsonian Institution and also in our museum, is an extraordinary collector that collected a lot of interesting material. Vladimir Chikatunov was the creator of our collateral collection for more than 20 years, and he also did extraordinary collections. They both collected in the places which do not exist now anymore. Turned to be agricultural or developed in any other ways. Sorry. Yes, young people which are also collecting, but also doing photographs, which is very important. We can use them for publications. My dear teacher, Amnon Freidberg, that died a year ago. He was a deep tourist, and he collected everything. His motto was to collect everything you can. He did it also before me. For example, this species, which was named after him, he collected half a year before I was born. He didn't know that he will have a student of Weevils. I started to work with him in 1996. Tried to collect all over the country, in every place, as you see. I also got a lot of help from colleagues, mainly from ecologists. They collected beetles with pitfall traps and sent weevils to me for identification. This is a difficult technique. I cannot dig so many holes. Also, our museum as a policy is accepting collections from any origin, from official museums and from private people. So all over the years, we took most of the collections, and now they're housed in Steinland Museum of Natural History and can be studied. And these collections include a lot of weevils also collected in the places and in biotopes which do not exist anymore. Of course, I have a lot of colleagues all over the world, not only those that are on this slide, but with those, some of them I met personally and so visited several times in Israel. We published together, but I have many more that helped me. Thank you all. I would be happy to go on working with you. To some colleagues, I send materials, also all those so that I collected, and they published with the help of this material, also described the species after me, like this Tzionus. I have a lot of helpers. In fact, thousands of helpers, members of groups of interest in insects in the Facebook. And usually I'm getting a lot of information about weevils all over the country in different localities, sometimes very rare species, and not often, but sometimes even they're able to bring me the specimen itself, which is very valuable. After all, after 25 years, I published like 25 publications on Israeli weevil fauna. Most of them are available in online. And hopefully I will go on finalizing this study until I'm retired. We're talking about 1,000 species, something like 40% is already published, but many more are waiting for more work, identifying work, collecting and publishing. Thank you very much for your attention.